Howdy gamers, and I'll say it, months are dumb and are just made up by the calendar companies to sell more calendars. Well, I've had it up to here with the calendar companies. From now on, I'm using my own months and days, and you know what that means. That's right, now that I'm calling the shots around here, I moved the entire month of December into just one day of what you guys call July 25th. Of course, 24 hours doesn't really leave too much time, so we need to celebrate and fast. Luckily, I found a video game franchise that's winter themed that we can take a look at. Ice Climbers, everyone's favorite high tier character in Smash Ultimate, also has a video game, and it started development by R&D1 back in 1984 and was directed by Kenji Miki. He had also directed Excitebike, and he would peak 10 years later in 1994 when he directed the masterpiece that's known as Wario's Woods. Back to Ice Climber though, it was released January 30th, 1985, and in Ice Climber you play as Popo, and your goal is to get to the top of the mountain to get an eggplant back from the Condor. It's not as simple as it sounds though, there are 32 different levels and they get really hard as the game goes on. The game is high score based though, and once you beat the final level, nothing really happens, you just keep going from the first level. It is interesting enough though, and has a cool mechanic where you break the ground above you sometimes to progress. There's variety in enemies and different type of platforms as the game goes on, and the different types of platforms all have different physics, and to be honest are kind of annoying sometimes, but it does help to mix things up. Also, since it is high score based, at the end of every stage there's also a bonus level so you can get more points. There's also a 2-player mode where player 2 plays as Nana and you work together to get up the mountain. Overall, the game did pretty well in Japan, so when the Famicom was making its way over to the rest of the world as the NES, it made sense to bring over Ice Climbers as the launch title. So when the NES released on October 18th, 1985, so did Ice Climber. This was pretty much the same version that Japan got, but Nintendo of America censored it by replacing the baby seals with snowmen, because at the time Nintendo of America didn't want their games to have anything regarding sex, violence, or religion, or in other words, Nintendo were just complete wimps and didn't want their games to be epic. Of course, that wasn't the only version of Ice Climbers released that year. Back in the early days of Nintendo, they liked to port their games to PCs. So, they licensed Hudson Soft, the same people who would go on to make Mario Party, to port some games over to the NEC PC 8801 and the Sharp X1. Hudson Soft ended up porting a lot of Nintendo games like Excitebike, Balloon Fight, Tennis, Golf, and of course, Ice Climbers. Of course, let's be honest, by this point Ice Climbers was getting a bit old. It had been ported 4 times already, so it was time for Nintendo to just stop porting Ice Climbers and instead start focusing on a sequel. Nintendo just ported Ice Climbers to the arcade instead. To be fair, this version was a bit different than the Ice Climbers we've come to know and love. This was part of Nintendo's Versus series of arcade games, which had ports of NES games edited to be more focused on 2-player co-op. In the Versus Ice Climbers, there are only 24 out of the 32 levels, but in it you pick a level to race to the top of. And they also changed up the title screen a little bit, but other than that, it's pretty much the same game. But then, in February 1986, the Famicom Disk System came out. It was an add-on to the Famicom only released in Japan, and with this add-on, it allowed for larger games and better sound quality. It was finally time. Ice Climbers we made another port! This port was actually of the Versus Ice Climbers made for the arcade machines, but this time they changed up the graphics, removing the baby seals and replacing them in the snowmen, just like the version everywhere else got. But after this, we wouldn't see Ice Climbers for a while. It never did end up getting a sequel on the SNES or even the NES. The franchise slowly faded into obscurity until Masahiro Sakurai decided to add Ice Climbers to Super Smash Bros. Melee. And before you say no one wanted Ice Climbers in Smash Bros., someone yelled out in excitement when they were first shown off. Which just goes to show Nintendo could add the virus from Dr. Mario to Smash, and sure, a lot of people might get mad, but there will at least be one person who is happy. But the reason why they added Ice Climbers instead of the virus from Dr. Mario was because they wanted to add a character that was from the NES. And I know the virus from Dr. Mario was on the NES, and so were a lot of characters. They considered adding a bunch of them, like Balloon Fight, Excitebike, Urban Champion, Clue Land, but they ended up going with the Ice Climbers because Sakurai wanted a character that could only do things that that character could do. So if someone's ever being a freaking idiot and telling you that they want NES Soccer Guy for Smash, be sure to remind them that he can't get in because of Wii Fit Trainer Side B. What the frick? and it was because of the idea of having two different playable characters interested the Smash Bros. Team, Ice Climbers were added. And since they were added to Smash Bros. Melee, they've been a staple of the Smash Bros. Series, with the only time they didn't get added was in Smash for Wii U and 3DS, and that was only because they couldn't get the character to work properly on the 3DS version, so they had to cut him, but they still made an appearance as a trophy in the game. Surprisingly though, that's not the only game the Ice Climber franchise has made an appearance in. A few years after Melee came out in 2005, WarioWare Twisted released and had an Ice Climber minigame where you swing your hammer hitting enemies from the game. But unfortunately, like I said, since the first game on the NES, it hasn't received any sequels. There were some ports I didn't get to mention, like a port of the game to the Nintendo e-reader, to the Game Boy Advance Classic series of games, the Wii, 3DS, and Wii U Virtual Console, Nintendo Switch Online, and even the Versus Ice Climbers arcade game got ported over to the Switch as part of the Arcade Archive series. Overall, for being a franchise that hasn't received a new game in 35 years, I would say Ice Climbers is doing pretty well. I mean, it does kind of stink that more people know about the characters in Smash Bros. Than the actual game itself, and that's kind of why on the official Eric Derek Will This Franchise Come Back scale, I give it a probably not. I'm not going to say outright no, because like I said, Nintendo showed this franchise a lot of love, but at the same time, there hasn't been a new game in 35 years, and I just don't see Nintendo bringing it back anytime soon. I think it could work well as a 3D platformer on the Switch, and honestly, I would probably buy it. But back to my whole rebelling against the calendar company thing. As you can see, I'm sorta over that now. You see, there's a rumor going around that there's gonna be an NES Soccer Guy themed calendar. I don't really know if it's true or not, but I'm personally inclined to believe it, and I think it kinda speaks for itself. So I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of this month that's known as July, and remember to stay safe, and I love you guys.